Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with the final part of my April wrap-up. I will link parts 1 and 2 down below. I am slowly but surely catching back up with wrap-ups, so let's just get into it. Hopefully this will be an especially short one because I've got quite a few books that I don't think I'll need to spend a ton of time on. Famous last words. So the next book I finished was A Heart Worth Stealing by Joanna Barker. This is a proper romance that I received as an ARC in exchange for an honest review. I will link that video down below. I review this book and another book that I'm going to talk about in a minute, and it is spoiler free, so please check out that video for more thoughts. Our two leads are Genevieve Wilde, also known as Ginny, and then our hero is Jack, who is an inspector. He's a former Bow Street officer, so now he's kind of like sort of like a bounty hunter, private investigator type. Like, he's really looked down on. Like, that profession is really not considered very well by like polite society and everything, but Genevieve's father, who was the previous magistrate, has died pretty recently, and his watch, which is one of the only things she has left of him, has gone missing. And so Genevieve insists that it's been stolen. The other like people in the area don't really seem to want to listen to her, and so she ends up enlisting Jack's help and hiring him to find out who took it and to get the watch back. But they quickly become tangled up in some like bigger conspiracies and mysteries going on, and of course they end up spending more time together. And I was unfortunately underwhelmed by this one. I really thought I would like the premise because I've mentioned before how I really like, if it's like in this time period, this is in like early 1800s, I love a like working man because I feel like they are just so much more pleasant characters than like, you know, dukes or like the peerage or, you know, a count or something. Like, you just have a much better chance of them not being an asshole. And I liked Jack fine, and I did enjoy Ginny. I found like the characters likable enough. But I just wasn't super invested in their romance. Like, I just wanted more from that, and they had a couple moments I liked, but I wanted to get excited about the romance, you know, and I really wasn't. And then also I had mixed feelings about the mystery. There were some parts, especially at the end, that I found kind of frustrating, not because I kind of predicted them, but because of like the specific type of thing that they were, and I just didn't love that. So I thought this was fine, but definitely not my favorite by this publisher, and I gave A Heart Worth Stealing 3 stars. Again, check out my review for more thoughts. Next, I finished a picture book that is A Girl Named Rosita, the story of Rita Moreno, actor, singer, dancer, trailblazer, by Anika Altamoy Denise, and illustrated by Leo Espinosa. So of course, I always have to show off the beautiful illustrations here, and this is a picture book biography of Rita Moreno, and I loved this. I thought this was a really beautiful balance of like reading like a story, but then also providing some like useful biographical information. I think that's a real skill that picture books need to have and often excel at, and I just think that's really impressive. And I really enjoyed this. I like learning about Rita Moreno. I definitely haven't seen enough of her work, but I really was excited to get to see more about her, and it's made me even more excited to like watch some of the movies she's in. Like, I've seen her in West Side Story, but other than that, I don't think I've seen a lot of her like big like movie names or anything. But yeah, I gave A Girl Named Rosita 5 stars. Next, I finished Playing Hearts by W.R. Gingell. This is a very short novella that is a like an Alice in Wonderland kind of retelling. Our main character is named Mabel, and so she's been in this place called Underland many times before, and like weird and dangerous things keep happening when she's back there. We see a couple of visits when she's younger, but most of the book takes place when she's like an older teenager, and she ends up going back to Underland, and the Queen of Hearts is of course a part of the story and is terrifying. We see some of the other well-known characters like Hatter and the March Hare, and then we also have Jack, who is the aristocratic son of the Queen, and as the back of the book says, and thanks to an ancient ceremony performed by the Queen, Mabel's fiance. And so Jack is a very interesting character because we're not really sure whose side he's on, if he's on anyone's side, and like what's going on with that. So I really liked this one overall. I really enjoyed Mabel as a main character, and I thought her character arc of like becoming more confident and brave and strong in like these different ways was really well done. I really enjoyed following her, and I really liked this setting, like the way that Underland is characterized. I think it definitely pulls from kind of like the classic interpretations of Wonderland while also being its own thing. This is definitely like kind of a dark whimsy sort of thing, which I think lends itself really well to like Alice in Wonderland stories. And I also thought that this was an interesting take on like characters going like portal fantasy or going on adventures and things, because it's one of the ones where Mabel doesn't necessarily always want to go back to Underland. In fact, a lot of times she doesn't, for very good reason, and I think that makes a lot of sense, but then also you see the parts that are interesting or that are intriguing and that maybe would kind of like pull her back. Like I really thought that was very well done. There is also a romance in here, which overall I liked, but there's like a couple of things that I'm really not a fan of, and like they're things that I feel like W.R. Gingell does pretty frequently, and sometimes they work better for me than others. One of them is there's an age gap. It's not like a super egregious one, but it feels completely unnecessary. There's no reason it had to be there, and that's just not something I tend to enjoy. And then also the love interest like continually calls Mabel by a nickname that she did not give him. Like she did not give this character this name herself, like, or say like call me this. Nobody else uses this nickname, and like she never like gets mad or like corrects him about it. So like I guess we're supposed to assume that she's fine with it, but like I say in my Goodreads review, I even would have been fine with like just a passing reference to how like, oh, she likes that he uses a name for her that no one else does or something, just because yeah, like the nickname thing just really is not something I find cute or romantic. But other than that, I did really enjoy the romance. I thought the characters' interactions were fascinating, and yeah, I just thought it was a very engaging part of the story. Those two things, man, like, they're just not for me. And also, like I said, I have seen like those kinds of tropes done better in other stories I've read by W.R. Gingell, or done in ways that made more sense. Because like I said, the age gap thing wasn't like disturbing or anything, and it wasn't like a super big age gap. It's just like, why is this even here? It doesn't need to be here. And then also there was one character arc in this book that, while I enjoyed it, I think that we needed to see more of it happen on page and spend more time on certain parts of it. But overall, I did enjoy this, and I gave Playing Hearts 4 stars. Next, I finished Once Upon a Time, a short story collection, volume 1 by A.G. Marshall. And this is a very short collection of very short fairy tale retellings. And we have some of the really well-known ones, like we have Little Red Riding Hood. Is this one Cinderella? I'm trying to remember. Yes, Cinderella, Princess and the Pea, Snow White, Rumpelstiltskin, and Swan Lake. And yeah, like I thought these were really creative and interesting retellings. If you're somebody who enjoys fairy tale retellings and you like seeing different takes on them, I would definitely recommend this. I think if you're tired of them, I don't know that this collection is gonna like necessarily change your mind, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. My favorites were A Gown of Spider Silk, which is the Cinderella retelling, and The Curse of Gold, which is the Rumpelstiltskin retelling. And yeah, like I just really enjoyed this. I definitely want to pick up the second collection at some point, and I gave Once Upon a Short Story Volume 1 4 stars. Next, I finished All 4 Stars by Tara Derman. This is the first book in a contemporary trilogy that is following this little girl named Gladys, who absolutely loves cooking. That's like her passion. She loves like figuring out recipes and making them, and just she's like really, really into food. And her parents are very much not, like really, really strongly against her interest, and they don't understand it. And Gladys is overall pretty good about being safe, but she does have an incident involving the kitchen curtains at the beginning of the book, and she gets banned from the kitchen and from doing anything like kind of food related. Her parents want her to like not even do like safe extracurriculars related to cooking. They're like, we want you to be a regular kid and all this. And Gladys is devastated by this, and then to make matters even more complicated, she ends up sort of accidentally applying, like she submits an essay that ends up in the wrong inbox, and she ends up getting a long distance job as an anonymous food critic. So she has to like find her way to these different restaurants in like the big city. I think she lives like right outside New York, and she has to like do this as a job as well, without her parents knowing. We also follow her making some more friendships, and just her trying to navigate like her parents' punishment while also you know, just having interests that they don't understand, and also the food critic job. So as you can tell from the premise, that part is like, if that already annoys you, then maybe like don't pick this book up, because obviously there is like some suspension of disbelief involved. But I actually didn't mind that. Like, I'm not somebody who like is especially picky about those things in stories anyway, but I think especially in this one, I feel like the author did a pretty good job of actually like making it as believable as possible, you know, like how her essays would kind of end up there. And like they are very well written, so like I think it didn't like bother me, you know. Honestly, there is one unbelievable thing that I'll get to, but it's not actually related to the food critic thing. I also listened to this on audio. The narrator was Kathleen McInerney, and I thought she did a very good job, and I really liked Gladys as a main character. I really loved seeing her friendships and seeing those develop, and the way that I think some of them go in ways that are maybe less common in like middle grade kind of friendships, and I really like that. And I also loved that she does have supportive adults around her. Like, her parents aren't super supportive of her interests, but like her neighbor's mom is absolutely lovely, and I loved getting to see Gladys just spend time with her. I also loved the food element of this book. Like, the descriptions of food is just, it's so great, and I really just loved seeing that incorporated into the story, like seeing Gladys's interest like portrayed that way. So the thing I mentioned about finding it unbelievable, so like I mentioned that Gladys's parents like hate cooking, like they're really not into cooking or food or like not even like fancy food, but just like they don't understand it as an interest at all. So like they basically never use their kitchen, they're like always ordering takeout and stuff. But the thing that like I like couldn't get past is that when they do actually cook food, the way it's described, I'm like, how have you guys not all gotten food poisoning like 17 times? Like, how is Gladys still allowed to live with you? Like, they're talking about like undercooking like fish or like meat and all this stuff, and I'm just like that was the part that like was really hard for me to like suspend my disbelief enough, because I'm like, this is not only just unpleasant to read about, but I'm like, how have you guys not gotten like very, very sick from this at some point? I mean, like, some of the things they describe are just like, okay, that wouldn't be dangerous, it would just like probably taste gross, but like there are some things where like I was genuinely concerned. So that was the only part that like bothered me with how it felt unbelievable, but overall I did enjoy this. And I also really like that by the end of the book, Gladys's parents felt much more like well developed and like three-dimensional, because like it wasn't just like the cooking thing, it was like they felt like very exaggerated in ways that I think didn't match the rest of the story. And so by the end of it, I feel like they felt like much more like reasonable characters. So yeah, I ended up really enjoying this one, and I gave all 4 stars 4 stars. Next, I finished The Case of the Peculiar Pink Fan by Nancy Springer. This is the 4th book in the Enola Holmes series, which I've been reading these pretty close together, so I actually don't really have a lot of like new things to say about this one. One thing I did like and find interesting is that this case is actually connected to an earlier case that I was not satisfied with how it ended. So I like that we get some more some more time with it here, and I ended up really enjoying this one as well. I have been consistently really liking the series. I like the writing. I love Enola as a main character. I think the characterization in general is really well done, and even though these books are all very short, like they're under 200 pages, I feel like Nancy Springer does a great job of like writing a mystery that feels complete while also having enough like character development. So yeah, I gave The Case of the Peculiar Pink Fan 4 stars. I have a hard time saying the title, but I enjoyed it. Next, I read Enter the Body by Joy McCullough. This is a novel in verse that is a feminist look and critique of like several different like Shakespeare plays, specifically the tragedies and the way that they treat women. And I buddy read this with my friend Julia from Shakespeare and Such and Mary Margaret from MM's Musings. It was a very like loose buddy read week. It kind of ended up being just like sporadically us all checking in. This one, I didn't love it as much as Blood, Water, Paint. And I think with the premise sounding like so very much my thing, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was almost inevitable I would be a little disappointed, but like I did still really enjoy this. We get several, like it's a very like interesting kind of structure and setting. So there are these parts that take place like in like the space under a theater, and that's very like, I don't even want to say metaphorical. It's like a very like strange like no man's land kind of setting in a way that I think really worked. And then we have the sections that are like these different women from Shakespeare's plays telling their stories, like specifically Juliet, Ophelia, and Cordelia. And we have them like telling their stories, and then we have kind of like telling the story a different way. It's like, well, if I could change it, if I could tell my own story how I wanted, here's what I would say. And then interspersed with that, we have kind of glimpses of some of the other women in Shakespeare's plays, but those are like the main ones we focus on. And I liked the verse here. I think it didn't work for me quite as well or quite as consistently as in Blood, Water, Paint. But like I said in my Goodreads review, is like when it hits, it really hits. Like there were some absolutely beautiful passages. Like there are some really emotional lines. There's some parts that just really like got to me and that I think were really well done. There also just were parts that didn't do that for me, especially with some of the characters. Like Juliet's section was kind of like this, and I think Ophelia's initial section was kind of like this too, where it's like it's not like badly written, it's just like very much like what you would expect from a verse telling of this character, if that makes sense. But I did really enjoy Cordelia's sections and like the interpretations of certain things, and I also really liked later on in the book, I liked how some of the sections with Juliet and Ophelia, like the retelling parts, were done. And then also, I think Juliet didn't quite enjoy the like modern writing sections, which happens like in the play space, as much as I did, which I totally understand. I'm actually surprised at how well those worked for me. Like the modern language and like the humor and like the way that it is kind of jarring, but in a way that feels very intentional and like focused rather than like distracting. So I actually really loved those sections, and again, that's something I wouldn't necessarily have expected to work for me as well as it did, but I liked that. One of my big complaints is like, I really thought we were gonna get a perspective section from Lavinia, and we didn't. And I kind of understand, but I also really don't. And I'm glad that Julia had like finished this before me, or like had gotten farther and like mentioned, like warned me that we didn't get a section from her, because I think I would have been even more disappointed if I didn't know that. But I think it was a real missed opportunity, like to have a character who like has very literally had her voice taken away from her. Like I think she should have had her own point of view. And I think it also would have been an interesting one to include for a lot of different reasons, and one reason being I think that her story is not retold nearly as often, and I just think it could have been really interesting, in addition to being very like powerful and like an important thing symbolically. And then also I really wanted some Cleopatra sections, okay? Like, I understand why we didn't, because like I think Joy McCullough probably wanted to focus on a few characters and really go more in depth on them, but like I just really wanted some Cleopatra sections, okay? I think that would have been fantastic. And I think that would have made this more, I don't want to say more creative, because that sounds really negative. I think it would have been interesting to see some of the perspectives she chose being less in the public consciousness, you know? Because like there were sections for all of these three main women, like Cordelia, Juliet, and Ophelia. There were sections in all of them that I loved, but I think that it would have been cool to have some more surprising parts. I think that's one of the reasons that Cordelia's section was my favorite, is that I think there was more room to kind of play and interpret, and I think Joy McCullough really took that. So like, I did still very much enjoy this book, it just wasn't my favorite thing I've read from her. I gave Enter the Body 4 stars. Next, I finished Sandry's book. This is the first in the Circle of Magic series by Tamora Pierce, and I'm doing this as a read-along along with Beautifully Bookish Bethany and a bunch of other wonderful people. I will link our live show down below, and I had never read this series. I read only one Tamora Pierce book as a kid, and for whatever reason I just never like got into her books, but I've read a few as an adult and really enjoyed them, and I am so glad that I am part of this read-along, because I am loving this. This is like very clearly my favorite Tamora Pierce thing I've read so far. Like, I just think this is fantastic. So this is a fantasy series, of course, and we are following these 4 kids who kind of all get discovered. Like, they have like these different kinds of magical abilities, and they get taken to a kind of training school for them. And all of these kids have come from some very difficult situations, some in more obvious ways than others, but they all honestly have like trauma. One of the things that we talked about in the discussions has been just how compassionate and how well done the writing is around like these kids and what they've gone through and how that has affected their worldview and what it is like for them to finally be safe and to finally have adults who look out for them and care for them. It's just incredibly beautiful. And apparently Tamora Pierce was like a child psychologist or like something, so it totally makes sense that she's so good at this. But yeah, so this is the book that is it's called Sandry's book, and I do think she gets a little more point of view time than the other characters, but I actually really like how well balanced the story is between these 4 different kids. And in this first book, they're kind of just adjusting to being at this school, to realizing that they have magic, just starting to kind of understand it a little more and work on it, and also getting to know and trust each other a little bit more. And I just absolutely adored this. As I've said, I really, really love these characters. I love these kids so much. I love the adults around them. Like, their relationships kind of show that like it is possible to like respect and protect like kids at the same time. Because like, for example, these kids are very understandably not used to being able to go to adults for help. And so they're used to kind of making their own decisions or, you know, not listening when people tell them something. And even though sometimes the adult characters will, you know, get upset, like they're worried about them because they could have been hurt, they understand where the kids are coming from. And so then they're like, okay, the reason that you shouldn't do this is because of this. And then the kids understand. And I just like, that's such a little thing, but it's also not. Like, I just really love that. And I know people talk about like middle grade fantasy books and sometimes like, oh, it's so unbelievable that the kids would be doing this and the adults wouldn't be helping. I feel like this book, like this series, is a real like counter argument to that. I just really, really love that. I also love the magic. I of course love the fact that Sandry's magic is basically textiles. Like the weaving and spinning and like embroidery magic. I absolutely love that. And I just really feel for all of these kids so much. Like I'm loving this. This is also like a very cozy feeling series, because even though there are stakes and there is some danger, there are some bad things that happen, it is overall, like, this book and series is about like healing and like support, and just, it's incredibly beautiful. I'm loving the series so much. I gave Sandry's book 5 stars. Next, I finished a series finale. That is The Girl Who Raced Fairyland All the Way Home by Catherine M. Valenti. This was the last book discussion for my, the like Fairyland read-along part of my Not a Genre book club. I've been hosting these with My Name is Maddie Ness. I will link our live show and Maddie down below. What do I even say about this book? I loved it. This is one of the most perfect endings to a series I have ever read in my life. I don't even know how to begin like summarizing it because it is the end of a series, so I guess I'm just gonna skip that part. But I loved this. This is my favorite book in the series. I adore September and our main characters so, so much. I feel like we have come so far with them. I feel like this ending was so beautiful and thoughtful and well balanced, and this is yet another example. Like, I feel like I say this all the time with series finales, but this is yet again an example of how you can have a series ending that feels meaningful, that has like costs and, you know, difficult decisions, and that still feels like fulfilling, you know, at the end. I loved the way things played out here. I loved getting to revisit some characters and places and moments that we love. Like, there were parts of this that like truly brought tears to my eyes, and they were not always the parts I expected. Like, there was one section with the narrator, who has definitely been like their own character throughout, that really got me choked up because of like what it says about stories being home. And I love what this book just says in general about home, and like I loved seeing like Fairyland and like the human world, the regular world, treated the way that they were. And oh, I don't know, like, just watch our live show if you want more thoughts, because I'm obviously just having a lot of emotions about this series. But I absolutely loved this. I thought the ending was fantastic. Like, it's so beautifully executed, and it also delivered so much on like the emotional investment. So absolutely fantastic, perfect, top tier finale. I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, probably this is like a prime candidate for a series that is a favorite, even if individual books aren't always favorites. So yeah, I gave The Girl Who Raced Fairyland All the Way Home a very strong 5 stars. And finally, the last book I have to talk about, I'm actually ending with another 5 stars. So we had 3 5 stars in a row to end the month, which I love that. That is Beauty Reborn by Elizabeth Lowem. This is the other arc that I received in exchange for an honest review. So I will link like that same video I have linked below. And this is a very short Beauty and the Beast retelling that is looking at sexual assault and PTSD from that, and like the impact of that and healing from that. And I feel like it was done with a lot of like thoughtfulness and compassion. And I mean, the author like talks quite a bit about like the way she approached this story and what led her to and everything. But I just thought this was a really, really powerful look at this fairy tale. I think it made a lot of sense to look at it through this lens. So I thought the overall story and like themes and ideas were really well executed. I also like, it was really, really interesting seeing the parts that the author took from the original fairy tale or from famous versions of the fairy tale, and then which parts she didn't. And something I thought was interesting is that there's not a lot of side characters in this book, like there often is in Beauty and the Beast retellings, but I didn't even miss them because I thought Beauty herself was such a strong and interesting protagonist, and I thought the Beast character was also incredibly interesting. And so I didn't even like miss having other characters. I thought just the character development in general was fantastic. Like the way that the two leads very, very slowly get to like know and trust each other, like especially on Beauty's side for very obvious reasons. I just thought it was done so beautifully and just very respectfully. Like I think this book did a really, really good job of like addressing the ideas that it wanted to, while also still being a very engaging and interesting story. Like I think this is one of my favorite Beauty and the Beast retellings. Like I just think it really delivered, and even though, like I mentioned in the review, there were some parts of the writing that felt a little bit overwrought, like, you know, especially some characterization words that were used a lot, I think that overall the writing was very good and it fit the story and it served the story. And I just ended up really, really, it's weird to say enjoying this one because obviously it deals with very dark topics, but I think that it was just a really, really well told story in a lot of different ways. So I gave Beauty Reborn 5 stars. Again, check out my review if you want more detailed thoughts. But yeah, so that was finally the rest of the books I read in April. Please comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you're interested in any of these. Yeah, like ending my month with 3 5 stars is a wonderful feeling. So let me know if you've read anything you loved recently. Let me know a series finale that you love. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!